Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl on your face while you're sleeping. Scientists and researchers have always been fascinated by giants and have been trying to find any traces of them for centuries. Even though confirmed proof of huge giants has not been found, from mysterious mounds with enormous femurs to swords that are 9 feet long, here are some of the most mysterious discoveries of giants made by humans. Number 10. Serpent Mound. Serpent Mound is the world's largest surviving effigy mound, a mound in the shape of an animal from the prehistoric era. In 1894, an Ohio farmer was going about his business hunting some foxes. He was unaware of the fact that it was the day that was going to change his life. For more context, he stumbled on a major archaeological discovery. This was not something ordinary, because he had found graves which appeared to contain ancient giants. Not something you see every day, right? Located in southern Ohio, Native American structures have been excavated a few times since the late 1800s, but the origins of Serpent Mound are still a mystery. The graves were found near the Serpent Mound, and it was found that they were made from limestone slabs, which is something not really used these days. Seems like giants were pretty fancy back in the day. The graves there were 3 feet long, which is almost a meter, and a foot wide. It is believed that the giants that were buried there were more than 6 feet long, as the skeleton suggested. These giants are assumed to be from the era known as the Nephilim. The Nephilim appears in the Bible and known as the result of a union between divine sons of God and mortal women. One of the skeletons had a spear stuck inside its chest. Scientists are still researching more about the origins of these skeletons, and when they do find more proof of giants, there'll be another video waiting for you. Number 9. The New York Giants. No, we're not talking about the American football team here. This video is all about giants. We will come back to football in some other video, don't worry. But we have to say, the coincidence is unsettling. In 1871, in the town of Cayuga, the local newspaper reported on an archaeological dig that was taking place near the area. The dig was at a Native American burial ground, which unearthed 200 giant skeletons, some measuring up to 9 feet tall. It was also estimated that the remains could have been up to 9,000 years old. At the time, the discovery of these remains was widely reported in the media when visitors claimed that they saw giant skeletons being raised from the ground by the archaeologists. But today, the remains have disappeared. Maybe all of them came back to life and formed a football team called the New York Giants. What do y'all think? Number 8. West Virginia. In many of the ancient burial mounds of West Virginia, a number of giants were found in years past. Other large skeletons were found in the early days of coal mining, and more were found as people were excavating the ground for other purposes. One of the first reports of a giant occurred in 1774, when Jack Parsons was walking along the recently flooded Cheat River. When he noticed some bones protruding from the ground, he pulled a femur from the soil, and when he compared it to his own, it was 7 inches longer. He then removed the rest of the bones and laid them out, estimating that it would have stood about 8 feet tall. Other settlers also found gigantic skeletons in the area, which was soon dubbed Giant Town. The most recent discovery of these giants was made in 1959 when Dr. Donald Dragoo excavated the Cresap Mound in Marshall County. There, he unearthed a 7-foot, 2-inch skeleton. The mound was made by the Adena culture, who are Native Americans thought to have lived in various states of America from 1000 to 200 BC, though some people think that the mound is much more recent. Number 7. The Ozarks. Buried under broad, flat stones in a symmetrical mound, a landowner near Lake of the Ozarks unearthed a mystery. Atop the mound grew 5 stately white oak trees. Beneath it, giant bones, bleached white with time. J.D. Crane in 1934 cut down the trees on the land that he owned because he built a home, and those white oaks blocked his view. He found the mound's contents while leveling the ground. He counted the rings in those trees and reported they numbered at least 100, suggesting the dead had fallen and been buried in the early 1800s, or even earlier. There were 7 skeletons, according to the tale, and at least one of those skeletons was at least 8 feet tall. With the bones were 7 artifacts that Crane thought must be petrified human hearts. That was in April of 1934. Nearly a century later, there are still more questions than answers. The biggest problem: no one knows where the bones are, or even where to start looking. Number 6. Graveyard of Giants in China. In late 2016, archaeologists began excavating at a Neolithic site in Jiaojia, a village in China's Shandong province. At the site, they dug up enthralling finds, but what stood out the most was a much later discovery. They found a graveyard that contained the bodies of several men who were 6 feet or taller. Now, while this may not sound to be much, the men would have been outstandingly tall for the age in which they lived. No pun intended. The remains date to about 5,000 years ago and were buried in very large tombs. One of the people found in the graveyard measured approximately 7 feet 2 inches. If by any chance he were still alive, he would have certainly exceeded 1.9 meters. While the details were small in regards to the average height of Neolithic populations in that day and age, these men were definitely giants compared to the average person. Number 5. San Diego Giant. At number 5, we have this fascinating discovery that reports on a giant mummy found in San Diego. It was dismissed as a hoax, but some researchers have different views. Let's take a closer look, as there's some intrigue and inconsistency with this popular story. This first report appeared in 1895 with the heading, quote, 9 feet high and probably a California Indian. When accurately measured, it turned out to be 8 feet 4 inches and was, quote, carefully inspected and measured by scientists. 13 years later, in 1908, when the mummy was being exhibited, the researchers ran some tests and suddenly dismissed it as a hoax, saying it was made from gelatin. The fact that it took that long, after spending $500 to acquire it, plus the fact that it was carefully inspected by experts 13 years earlier, does suggest that there may be more to the story than meets the eye. The strange twists and the immense amount of money spent on this make this worthy of inclusion in our list. What do you think? Was the giant real or not? Number 4. Miamisburg Giant. Ohio is the hub for giant discoveries in the country. Here we have the coolest, tallest, and the most mysterious mound around. Miamisburg Mound is believed to have been built by the Adena culture anywhere between 1000 to 200 BC. It is the largest conical burial mound in Ohio, which is nearly 70 feet tall. Numerous skeletal remains were uncovered from the mound, including a giant jawbone and bones of unusual size. But it was the discovery half a mile away that became a national sensation and was reported in the Middletown Signal on January 17, 1899, with the headline, "Bones of Prehistoric Giant Found Near Miamisburg." Scientists said the authenticity of the skull is beyond any doubt. The jaw is assumed to belong to a man who was at least 8 feet tall, and in some theories, even taller than that. Number 3. Giant Skull in Victoria, Texas. Although the majority of the articles on giants are dated between the late 1800s to very early 1900s, making it very hard to track down a reference for information, one article from 1940 tells quite a clear tale. In the San Antonio Express, there was a story of a giant skull that's said to have been twice the size of a normal skull. The skull was unearthed after a large-scale archaeological excavation at the Mound along the Guadalupe River in Victoria, Texas. When the head of records at the Texas Archaeological Research Laboratory was reached for inquiry about the mysterious skull, she claimed that the specimen was noted as missing from the collection and had been for some time, not even showing up in any of the inventories undertaken. Quote, initially, the finding was recorded as a large skull in the now famous Mound site, with reports noting that it was of unusual size. But now that skull has vanished. You're not likely to find any mention in papers or official reports. All evidence points to a gigantic, non-human skull, but the question is, where is it? And with that, it's now time for today's subscriber pick. Today's photo was sent to us by one of our subscribers. If you come across a photo online and want to know more details about it, just send it on over to us. Who knows, we might even feature it in a future video. Number 2. This is a photoshopped image of a giant skeleton being examined by a scientist. There are many fake pictures of giants like this one on the internet, but we get the idea behind them. We now know that giants once existed, and even though they may not be 100 feet tall, the discovered ones are definitely interesting and very intriguing, and they open room for more research and mysteries. Number 1. West Hickory. We saved the best and the biggest giant discovery for last. In 1870, a giant skeleton was discovered that was 18 feet tall. Yeah, you heard that right. The headline of this chart topper reads, quote, "The Cardiff Giant Outdone. Alleged discovery of a giant in the oil regions." This report originally came from the Oil City Times in 1870, and underneath the immense armor, it revealed some surprising anatomical oddities and a skeleton that reached a staggering height. It was estimated to be 18 feet tall, and the bones were being prepped to be sent to New York. Clearly, this could be an exaggeration, as 18 feet is unheard of in the historical record, but the matter-of-fact description is intriguing. Interestingly, the skeleton was reported to be buried 12 feet below a mound, which opens up all types of questions for the giants community. Which one of these intrigued you the most? Let us know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.